And another Ice Wizard. Put down a pump. Can we mirror that pump? Yes, we can mirror that pump. We're up to 5 pumps. Okay, down to 4 pumps. We got the Ice Wizard. Cycle back to the pump. We have almost 6 pumps. 6 pumps. 6 pumps. We have 6 pumps. Here we go. Let's put some pressure on the left-hand lane. Let's put it down another pump. Let's put some pressure down the right-hand lane. Cycle down through it. Put down another pump, maybe? I don't know. A lot of pumps. Okay, I think it's good. Okay. Whew. That was a lot of pumps. Hello fellow Clashers, it is KairosTime, and today I've got a special video that is geared to helping you win the Bandit Draft challenge that we've got going on right now by helping you learn how to draft the best decks. I've got some general tips that I'm going to go over with you. I'm going to go over my specific draft picks that I chose that helped me get to that 12th win and win the Bandit, and then I'm also going to end this video by opening up the chest that I won by completing the challenge and winning that Bandit. Now, my very first general tip here is to wait if you do not have a whole bunch of gems to spend. The reason why is because once people get in there and they win their draft or their Bandit, there's actually not really good, it's not a good option to keep on going into the challenge unless you have something to prove. The reason why is because the rewards are actually decreased once you've won that. It's much better to go into do a grand challenge. So wait if you need to, but if you have the gems, go ahead and do it as much as you can and you need to practice and get used to it. The Bandit is a very unique card, and you'll do better in this challenge as you get to learn how to use her and also how you learn to counter her. Now, the biggest thing with this deck, with this challenge, is it's a draft challenge. As you guys know, draft challenges are super fun. You can play with some of the wackiest decks ever. But at the same time, it can be really frustrating if you don't have, if the challenge, or you weren't able to draft the best cards, or maybe there was a weird situation. There was one situation where I ended up losing because I drafted 2 spells and my opponent drafted 3 spells for me, and I ended up losing because I couldn't defend any single push because I had all spells. You guys get that. That's very frustrating. Also, don't be discouraged if you do not win this challenge. It is not easy to do. When it comes to this challenge, the odds are astronomical. Over 8,000 players jump into the challenge. And when it comes down to it, only 2 people win with 0 losses, 12 people win with 1 loss, and then 39 people win with 2 losses. That comes to 53 people total out of that 8,192 people that do enter into it, which means that the one person, the odds are 1 person out of 150 people, 154 people end up winning. That's 0.64%. 0.64. You're not even at 1%. It's ridiculously difficult to win here. That's why I made this video, to try and give you guys the best tips and help you get there. Now, I did want to talk specifically about the Bandit. The Bandit is the only constant in this challenge. Now that means you have to learn how to counter her, you have to learn how to play her as well. She's countered really easily by little ground swarms like the goblins and spirit goblins, even just regular skeletons of the skeleton army, but she's also really good at countering against ranged support troops like the musketeer, the wizard, and etc. You guys know exactly what I'm talking about. When it comes to choosing her, you're going to be tempted to try and pick her every time because she's a new, fun, exciting card. You can do that, but only if you know how to use her. Honestly, I highly recommend only selecting her if you think that she will be a good pick for your deck. Make sure that as well, you're very careful about going with an all-air deck. If you go with an all-air deck, then it's going to be very difficult for you to defend against the Bandit, so make sure you watch that. Right there, that is the winning challenge replay of my 12-win run that ended up winning me the Bandit. Very exciting. I'm super excited to play around with her, hopefully make some challenge-winning decks using her. For the rest of the video, I'm mostly going to be covering why I'm selecting specific cards for my draft. These are all the choices that I made on my way up to that 12th win. Now, I'm not going to be showing a whole lot of gameplay. In fact, I'm not going to be showing any except for that one match that you most recently saw. The reason why is because the gameplay itself is going to be determined by the person that has the most overall understanding of how all of the cards work in the game, and having a general understanding of how to play both Siege control, and beat down decks. Most people only know how to do one, and so that's why a balanced playstyle is actually really beneficial in this type of situation. But what I can help you learn is why I'm making specific decisions in the actual draft, and that is my goal. So in this type of situation, we have the Knight in the Furnace. Now, when you're picking your first card, I almost always make my decision based off of which card counters which. The Knight doesn't do a very good job counting the Furnace. The Furnace doesn't really counter the Knight, but the Furnace does offer a little bit more pressure and is also a better overall solid defense to a lot of different cards, which is why I decided to go with the Furnace. Now this next situation was a really tough one for me actually. The reason why is because both cards do a really good job at countering the Bandit. I don't know who's going to have the Bandit, but I want to make sure that I can at least counter the Bandit if possible. I thought about going Spear Goblins to help a little bit with the air, but I actually decided to go with the Skeletons, and my original thought was to try and help cycle back to that Furnace. Maybe I can overwhelm my opponent with a Furnace cycle deck in case I don't actually have a solid win condition. This next situation was the Witch or the Baby Dragon. Kind of a tough situation actually, but honestly I think that the Baby Dragon is a better card overall. The Witch is good, but she's 5 elixir and doesn't quite offer the damage that I would like my 5 elixir cards to have. One thing I'm always trying to do when I'm doing a draft pick is trying to overwhelm my opponent with really elixir heavy cards, and the Witch can work. Unless I choose a P.E.K.K.A. If I choose a P.E.K.K.A, I do not want my opponent to have the Witch because of how well she does at countering the P.E.K.K.A. That is why I decided to go with the Baby Dragon. Now this next situation, the Log or the Arrows, that's a tough call. Well, honestly, I looked at the situation and I thought to myself, what's going to be a better fit for my deck? I have the Furnace and the Baby Dragon. That helps with air, and so I'm not too concerned about it, even if my opponent does have a minion horde. So I'm going to go ahead and select the Log, and then I'm looking at my opponent's deck. Arrows doesn't really help my opponent at all, unless they gave me the minion horde, which they might. But I can't really make my decisions based off of what my opponent might or might not do. We don't even know if the minion horde is in this, and so I decided to go with the Log. Now we're on to round 2. First option, the Log or the Arrows. What to pick? That's actually really tough. I could probably go with either one and it would be fine. I decided to go with the Log and then just made sure that in the future I would have an option against against air troops. Up next, we have the Ice Wizard or the Minion Horde. Now I did at this point make a mistake in the fact that my opponent does have the arrows and the Minion Horde, because arrows would do a very good job at countering against the Minion Horde. But I can't deal with that right now. I have to focus on which card to select. The best option, honestly, is going to be the Ice Wizard. Why not the Minion Horde? Well, because he has a solid counter against my Minion Horde, and I do not want to be forced into a situation where I have to use the Minion Horde, he arrows it, and I'm left helpless. The next pick was the Bowler or the Prince. Now, in this, the Prince is a fun card, he's cool, but the Bowler offers so much on defense that I just felt like I couldn't give that up. I also did have the Log to try and reset the Prince's charge, which is why I decided to go with the Bowler. Now, Rage or the Elixir Collector. I went with the Pump. Rage is an okay option, especially if he has the Minion Horde. That's going to be a little difficult if he ends up using that, but if I can apply some pressure and play really defensively with my Bowler, my Log, and my Ice Wizard, I know that I can cycle up and put up a bunch of pumps. This was a hard match, but how did I end up winning? I actually did Hexa Pump. 6 pumps on the ground and forced my way through with a Bowler Wizard Knight combination. It was awful and it lasted forever, but I was able to play defensively and also build up my pumps, and it ended up working out pretty okay. Up next is the Bandit or the Musketeer. Now the Bandit does a really good job at countering the Musketeer, so I thought that the Bandit would actually be a better option, especially if left one-on-one. The Bandit does a much better job. So I went ahead with the Bandit, and then up next I had the choice between the Goblins or the Ice Spirit. I didn't want to give my opponent the Goblins because the Goblins do such a good job at countering the Bandit. Ice Spirit does an okay job as well, but the Goblins are a little bit more secure, so I felt like I wanted to go ahead and go with that. Up next is the Guards or the Spear Goblins. Now I'm giving him one option against the Bandit, but I feel like the Guards do a better job overall. They're pretty versatile, and the Spear Goblins don't quite fit the anti-air needs that I would like. So right now, I actually selected the guards. I'm in a little bit of a difficult situation if he does have a lot of air troops, but I decided to actually take the lightning in this situation. My hope is that he has some type of other card that pairs along with the musketeer that I can lightning and get rid of both of them, as well as the musketeer, as well as some tower damage. It actually ended up working over and over and over again in this match, and that made that a wrap. Okay, so here we are, round 4, and I've got an interesting situation between the skeletons and the zap. I know that the skeletons counter the bandit, but I also know that the zap is a very excellent versatile spell to be using in a lot of different situations. I actually went with the zap. I probably would have been okay with the skeletons, but that's what I chose. Now with this situation, I have either the Sparky or the Inferno Dragon. Either way, they're both zap bait, but I think it's more difficult for people in a draft challenge to actually counter the Inferno Dragon than it is to counter the Sparky, and because I have Zap, I can definitely use that to my advantage. Up next, I have a choice between the log and the arrows. The log, once again, I just felt like this was going to be a better option just in case I need to like push back the Sparky or do some type of situation like that. When it comes down to this last card choice, it's actually a really tough one. I spent the rest of it, and this was to choose between the Musketeer or the Wizard. I don't really have a good option for this because the Musketeer actually counters the Inferno Dragon, and the Musketeer also does a good job at countering the Wizard for 1 less elixir. I decided to go with the Wizard because I thought that the Wizard was going to be a better help to try and get my Inferno Dragon to the tower if I needed to do that. Also, what I was afraid of is a Wizard behind a Sparky, because those two cards together actually can be very troublesome, even if you do have Zap. Here we are, round number 5. I have the choice between the Bandit and the Knight. The Knight does a much better job at countering the Bandit than the Bandit does to the Knight, which is why I actually decided to go with the Knight. It's very important to make sure that you're not just selecting the Bandit just because you want to try her out and figure the card out. It's really important to make sure that you're making the best decks for the right choices. You'll see right there that I actually selected the Tesla over the Bomb Tower. The Bomb Tower is it's in a weird stage right now. It's not super great, and the Tesla offers good defense against air as well as ground. And right now, since I only have one card and it's a ground troop, then that seemed like the best option. Up next, I have the choice between the arrows and lightning. Because I want to also make sure that I have a good cover of the air, the arrows actually seemed like a better option for me at the time. Also, since he has the Bomb Tower and the lightning, that's going to be an expensive deck for him to be having to deal with. I mean, those are two expensive cards, all for defense of some sort. He could go on the offense with the lightning, but you guys get what I'm saying. The last pick is between the archers or the Ice Wizard. I wanted a good option against the Bandit, and so I decided to go with the archers. The Ice Wizard would have been an okay option. It just kind of felt like this was going to be a better situation. Now, you'll notice that I wasn't able to draft any win conditions for either of us. That's okay. Sometimes just having a balanced deck is even enough to win in this challenge. Here we are, round 6. This situation here, I have a choice between the guards and the princess. Honestly, either one would probably be a good option. I decided to actually go with the princess because I feel like she adds a lot more versatility to a lot of decks. Very useful in a lot of different situations here. Up next, I have the choice between the arrows or the poison. What do I choose? I choose the arrows because arrows are a good counter to the princess, and I already chose the princess. I wanted to put him into a little bit of a difficult situation. This next choice is between the bandit and the freeze. The bandit is a better option, and I actually don't feel comfortable using freeze. I haven't played freeze for maybe 8 months, and it's been a very long time. It's a very high skill card. One tip that I have for you is to play cards that you feel comfortable with, that you know that you can actually use in a match. Now this last deck, or this last pick, is actually between the cannon and the mortar. The mortar is a siege card, and I'm really good at siege. But the cannon is a direct counter to the mortar, which is why I decided to go with the cannon. I know that I can play either control or siege at this point. I'm gonna have to just choose a win condition or hopefully he gives me a win condition and I can actually make it work out. Draft pick number 7 was a pretty easy one to start out with. The Ice Golem is a good counter to the Fire Spirits, and so I decided to go with that. Now up next is actually the choice between the Bandit and the Dark Prince. When you're doing a draft challenge, you should almost never choose the Dark Prince. The Dark Prince can be a good option in certain circumstances, but you have to really work to make him work out. And so I decided to go with the Bandit. She's 1 less elixir. Overall, a pretty good option. She's a good card. Next is the Musketeer or the Valkyrie. I decided to go with the Musketeer because I felt like the Musketeer was going to be a better option with my Bandit. I could have chosen the Valkyrie, especially because my Bandit does counter to that Musketeer, but I felt like, and also the Valkyrie counters the Musketeer, both are pretty good options, couldn't really have gone too wrong there. Now this last option is actually between the Barbarians and the Elite Barbarians. Now a lot of people would be tempted to try and choose the Elite Barbarians and put them in their deck because they're an intense win condition, but the Barbarians do such a good job at countering those Elite Barbarians, and if I know he has Elite Barbarians in his deck, I just need to make sure I always have 5 Elixir to try and counter them, and then I will be absolutely set. Round number 8, Bowler or Wizard? I think that the Bowler is a better option, and also the Bowler does a better job at getting rid of the Wizard. The Bowler just seems to be a better option in a lot of different circumstances, unless of course they're air troops, but that's why I decided to go with the Bowler, and I felt like that was a good option. Now, here I have the option of going between the Mega Minion or the Ice Wizard. I decided to actually go with the Mega Minion. I felt like the Bowler was going to be a solid option on defense, and the Mega Minion is a little bit more of a heavy hitter, and I just wanted to try and balance out my deck. Also, that put my opponent into a weird situation where he has 2 cards that kind of work the same, which puts him into some difficult situations. Up next is actually Poison or Arrows. Now, either one of these options would have been a good option. I decided to go with the Poison, and the Arrows would have worked out. The Poison was a little bit better in this situation, just in case he did have a lot of Swarm troops or anything like that. I can put some constant denial, and also the Poison does a good job at getting rid of the Wizard for a positive Elixir trade. The last option was between the Knight and also the Dart Goblin. Now, I actually really like playing with both of these cards. I would have felt comfortable using either one of them, but I wanted to use the Knight, and the reason why is because I felt like the Knight does a good job at kind of working out with that Bowler, and also I can drop a Knight in the right tile at the right time and make sure that that Dart Goblin basically is a waste. Round number 9. Here we have the Baby Dragon or the Minion Horde. The Minion Horde is a solid option in this, but the Baby Dragon does counter the Minion Horde, so I decided to actually go with that Baby Dragon. Both would have actually worked out pretty well, but I would have had to have been very careful if I actually selected the Minion Horde over the Baby Dragon because the Baby Dragon is so good on defense. Now, this was actually a unique option. The reason why I actually chose the Log, I love the Expo. I've played the Expo. It's in a lot of my ladder decks use the Expo, also challenge decks use the Expo, but he has 5 Elixir with his Minion Horde, and at this point I see an opportunity to actually give him really high cost cards, and so I decided to go with the Log to try and put him into a weird situation. I have a lot of experience with the Expo. I'm much better at defending against the Expo than most people do because I've seen how people try and defend me when I'm playing the Expo. Now I see that the opportunity is just perfect. The Knight or the Royal Giant, of course I'm going to give him that Royal Giant. That is going to give him 3 cards that are 5 Elixir or more, and that is so difficult to deal with. You can make it work out, but that is just such a tough situation. Lastly, I have the Spear Goblins or the Ice Spirit. Right now I have an okay card at trying to defend against the Bandit. I don't know who's going to have the Bandit, but I wanted to try and make sure that I actually had a solid option against the Bandit, and also maybe another option against the Minion Horde. Ice Spirit or the Spear Goblins both fit that, but I decided to go with the Spear Goblins because I felt like it did a better job at balancing out my deck. Draft number 10. Bandit or the Bomber? Well, the Bandit is a pretty hard counter to the Bomber, and so it's pretty obvious to go for the Bandit. She just goes right through, totally passes the Bomber's bomb, and is a very good option for this situation. Up next is between the Minion Horde or the Witch. This is actually a tough one. The reason why is because the Witch does a good job at countering the Minion Horde, but at the same time, like I said earlier, the Witch is a difficult card to fit into a lot of different decks, and I knew that I could at least use the Minion Horde to try and defend if I needed to. So I actually went with the Minion Horde with the hopes of playing a little bit more careful around that Witch. Up next, we have the choice between the Rocket or the Log. Now, in a lot of situations, I would actually pick the Log, But the fact that I gave him that witch means that I can do a ton of damage onto his tower by rocketing both the witch and the tower for only 1 less elixir. That's a good situation to be in, and in fact within the first minute I had used the rocket twice because he accidentally put the witch on the same side. It worked out very excellently. Now, this next situation, I knew that I had a very elixir heavy deck, so I wanted to be a little bit careful. So that is actually why I decided to go with the Ice Golem instead of the Valkyrie. Valkyrie is a solid option on defense, but I can also use the Ice Golem to try and kite the Valkyrie to the opposite lane if I'm being careful enough, which is why I decided to go with that Ice Golem. Draft pick 11. Goblin Barrel or the Knight? Well, the Knight's a very good option on defense, but the Goblin Barrel is a very excellent win condition in the draft challenge because a lot of people don't have, there's a lot of situations where they won't have a solid counter to the Goblin Barrel. Always? No, not necessarily always. Sometimes they will, but that's why I decided to go with the Goblin Barrel. Also, the Knight does not do a very good job of countering the Goblin Barrel without getting a little bit of damage onto the tower. Now, Clone or the Lumberjack? That's not hard. Go with the Lumberjack. The Clone, while it can be very good in some few circumstances, like if you have a Lava Hound in your deck, the Clone generally is not that great of a card, and I knew that the Lumberjack would actually help to cause a lot of pressure on my opponent. I'm thinking at this point, Lumberjack Goblin Barrel situation, not always the best, but it should help. And now I do have a solid way to try and take out a lot of DPS or a lot of health from some opponents. Now this is a situation, once again, the Prince, very good card, but Lumberjack Balloon can put some people into some tough circumstances where the Lumberjack gets taken out and then that Balloon is raging right onto the tower and drops it. So I decided to go with the Balloon. I actually got my opponent's tower in one push because he committed to one side, and then I went with the other with the Lumberjack Balloon and totally rocked his world. Now in this situation, my opponent has the Prince and Clone. I decided to give him the Giant Skeleton. Does the Giant Skeleton synergize with the Clone? Yes, it does, but it's really hard to pull that off, guys. It really is. I've built entire decks around trying to pull it off, and even then it's difficult. So I actually decided to go with the Bandit, and that was my draft pick. Ended up working out really well. This match was a piece of cake. Okay, guys, this is the last draft pick. I had the option of the Golem or the Lava Hound. Very tough situation, but I decided to go with the Lava Hound. The reason why is because the Lava Hound's a little bit more difficult to counter, and the Golem, when you drop that Golem down, you only have 2, maybe 3 elixir, depending on the elixir time, to be able to actually defend, and 3 or 4 elixir left over after dropping a Lava Hound sounds a lot nicer to me in this type of situation, especially when we don't know if he's going to have something cheap to try and defend some pushes. So going with the Lava Hound was generally a good option. Now, with this next situation was a unique one, the Lightning or the Zap. I'm having a thought when I first see this, and that first thought is that this Lightning is 6 elixir, he has a Golem that's 8 elixir. That's a lot of elixir. If I can get his average elixir cost up to the point where it's very difficult for him to get value out of his cards, that would be excellent. Also, the Zap does a good job at countering those Lava Pups, whereas the Lightning does not. Now this next situation was also kind of a tricky one here. Giant Skeleton or the Witch. Well, if I give him that Giant Skeleton, then he's going to have 3 cards that are at 6 elixir or more, and that is just too great to pass him up. So I'm going to give him that, but also that Witch is a good way to try and clear air troops, which is my main win condition. So going with the Witch and putting it in my deck is actually a really solid option at this point. This last option was a hard one. I ended up choosing the Log so that I could try and push some of his troops back if I needed to. Looking back, I probably should have selected the Fire Spirit so that he would have 1 less option against my Lava Hound, but it ended up working out really well. You guys saw how I was able to take him out, and those Fire Spirits didn't end up throwing the match, which was excellent. Okay guys, let's go ahead and open up this chest and take a look and see what is inside. First off, we got 11,000 gold. That's going to be such a big help. We also have 3 mini P.E.K.K.A.s. We got 6 elixir collectors. We have 67 elite barbarians, 80 spear goblins, 12 Valkyries, 14 wizards, 20 goblin huts. I'm hoping for a ton of epics right now, so my last card's a legendary. Not gonna happen. Okay, 343 goblin gangs, which is great. And 5 golems. I can get that sucker to level 5 now. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you do have any questions, I am more than happy to help. If you want to give me your draft questions, like, hey, what would you choose between these two cards? I'd be more than happy to help out. If you guys like this video, I'll try to do these videos similar to this in the future, and we also have other legendary drafts or other legendary events and things like that. For now, guys, this is KairosTime ticking by, and we will see you in the arena.